One of the most fundamental concepts of programming is the ability to store values and use them later. In almost every programming language, we use something called a variable. In JavaScript, to declare a variable for the very first time, the modern practice is to use the let keyword. This makes it clear to JavaScript that we are defining something new. So my very first example here says create two variables, one to store a grocery item and the other to store its price. Let's look at the first one. I'm going to use the let keyword, and then I'm going to give it a meaningful name using the camelCase convention. Camelcase means the very first word is lowercase, and then every word after that is capitalized. So if I want to call it grocery item, I do it just like that. And then we use the assignment operator. It's the equal sign, but we're not checking for equality. We're just assigning a value. So I'll use that and say grocery item is going to take the value of, and then I give it a value. I'm going to start with a string, red bell pepper. And then I end with a semicolon, as you should do for almost every line of code in JavaScript. Let's do the second one. Let's make this one a number. So if we're going to store the price, again, I'm creating a new variable, so I use the let keyword, and we will just call it price. I'm not going to get fancy with the name this time around. All right, 1.25. So we now have two, a string and a number. Both have been stored in separate variables. So what do we do with that? Well, the first thing that would be good to do is to prove that because we assigned these values, these variables now store those values. So let's print to the console and see what comes out. Now, the important thing to remember here is you're not printing a hard-coded value like red bell pepper. You're printing the variable name, and then it should actually evaluate to red bell pepper, right? And then again, console.log, and we will log the price. And if we did our job, this should come out with the two values that we assigned above. So let me open up the terminal and notice that I am already in the declaring variables exercises directory here. So I can use the node command to run this file directly. I'm going to say node demo.js. And when I do, we see two lines printed in the console, red bell pepper and 1.25. Notice that they're different colors. My terminal currently is showing numbers in yellow and is showing string results in the regular white like everything else. Yours might look different, that's okay, but this at least proves that our variables are storing those values. This is what we were going for. So this is how you establish a new variable and initialize it with a new value at the same time. The term initialize just means to give it an initial value. So it's something you do the first time, but you don't actually have to do them all at once like we've done here. This is pretty common, but sometimes you declare the variable first and then you initialize it later separately. So let's do a couple examples of that. This first one here says create a variable that will eventually hold the name of a grocery store department, then print it to see its current value before initialization. So let's just create it. I'll use the let keyword and call it department. And then I'm going to log it just as it is without having initialized it. Let's run our file again. And we see that it comes up undefined, and that's exactly right, because we told JavaScript that we were going to create a variable, but then we didn't do anything with it. So JavaScript says, well, I see that you have that and it's a valid name, but I have no idea how to define that. So the next step is to initialize it with a value. Now, something that's very important here is that you do not use the let keyword again. The let keyword is only used when you create the variable for the very first time. We've already done that. So now I'm going to just reference the variable and say, okay, JavaScript, that variable I created called department, I would now like to set a value, and we're going to call it produce. Okay, now I can print it again. And the second time it comes back with the string value produce. And notice that line 19 and line 24 here are the exact same line of code, right? But at this point, we had established the variable, we had declared it, but we hadn't initialized it. Once we initialized it, then we got a different result when we logged the value to the console. So that's all there is to it. The last thing I'm going to do, just because I want to continue to show you what this looks like, is to make a git commit. So I'm going to do a git status and see that I've made changes to this file, but it has not yet been staged. So I will add it and then check again, and we see that it has been staged. So now we're ready to make a commit. I'll say git commit -m and give it a meaningful message. And I will say completed the declaring variables demo. There we go. And that's it. All right. The last thing for you to do is to come over here to this directory in the code base and switch over to the practice.js file so that you can practice declaring variables. You're going to be able to work with strings and numbers. You're going to have opportunities to declare and initialize all at once, or to declare something and then initialize it later. And you might have some fun in the process. More importantly, you will get practice. You will have hands-on practice typing all of this stuff up and getting accustomed to the rhythm of coding, and it'll help it to sink in, because these are absolute building blocks. These are the ABCs for programming. So you need to spend some time on this to make everything you do in the future a little bit easier. All right, that's it. I will see you next time.